Expectations. We talk about expectations all the time with our programs, but a lot of the time we just jump right to the expectation and make sure they're quality and you establish them. But we never really talk about the process of creating the expectation, how you should establish and integrate it, and then how you can grow upon it from there. Stay tuned and listen to some insight on how you can go about approaching expectations and how they can benefit your program in a very, very special way. Hello, and welcome to Music Ed All In, the podcast for music education majors and young music education professionals. Coming at you from Northeastern Ohio, I'm your host, Kevin Neese. It's time to go all in. Hey, what's going on, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in. It has been a real privilege to make this podcast with you all, and I have been absolutely loving the feedback and just the positive vibes that you guys have been sending my way. I love doing this. This has been a lot of fun for me, and I hope it's fun for you to listen as well. Today, we are talking about a conversation topic that I really, really love and get really into, and it's expectations. And this kind of relates to program expectations and of your students and just how you can develop and really, really change your program and take it to a whole new level and direction by simply integrating quality and clear expectations. And I think I'm really passionate about this topic because, I look at my parents and, my mother is a band and choir director of 35 years, essentially. She's been in this game a long time, and I see the standards and expectations she holds her students to, and it's awesome to see. I look at my dad, who's, an organist of 40 years, and I see the expectations he holds of himself and the standards he holds his choirs to and his choristers to. And I think when they were raising us kids, me, my brother, and my sister, I gravitated towards that, and I found it really, really interesting to see how people respond to different expectations. And specifically with this episode today, we're going to talk about how expectations can be a game changer, not only for you, but your kids' families, your overall program, your school environment, and your overall community. One thing to be clear is in the conversation of expectations, a lot of the time we associate standards and expectations, and sometimes we use them interchangeably. Be clear that standards are different than expectations. We use them hand in hand a lot, and one kind of correlates with the other, but standards are definitely more academic based, I would say, and more academic driven. We think of our state standards, national standards for music education versus expectations, which more of the aesthetic quality, molding human beings into better people. That's the whole name of education, right? So expectations have such a strong pull because it's modifying and changing and improving everything that we do. Expectations can not only set up your day, your week, your month, your year, and ultimately the entire future of your program. So to clearly communicate how we're kind of driving this conversation, I think we need to think about it in three main categories. We're going to talk about creating the expectation. We're going to talk about implementing and establishing it, along with growing upon the expectation. Before you do any of that, though, you have to consider what culture you have created. If you're trying to just, sprout off expectations that are, just kind of off on a whim, you're not really going to get anywhere with them. You really have to ask yourself, are these expectations conducive to the culture that I am trying to create in this program? Assess your values. Why are you doing it the way that you do it? Why are we the way that we are at this moment in time? If you haven't thought about this culture, or if they don't line up the expectations with the culture you're trying to create, you need to start here before you do anything else. My first job, I was really fortunate to work in a place that was very, very community very, very community driven, very family oriented community. It was an all county school, and it was in Southern Ohio. It was in a very impoverished area, but the strong community aspect, even though it was an all-county school, I mean, you had all these sub-little towns, satellite towns that were so invested in the school, the athletics, the arts. It was just really, really cool to see how community-oriented it was. And when I took this job, I saw how the band program wasn't quite as community-driven, and I was like, this is the culture that I want to create here. I want to make it community oriented. I want it to be community driven, and I want them to give back. Along with that, I really wanted to establish this work hard for great reward mentality. And that was really inspired by, I love movies. So if you listen to this podcast, you're going to hear me to quote a lot of movies. That's just what I do. A League of Their Own, Tom Hanks has this moment where he's talking to the star catcher of the league. And the star catcher of the league is, she's talking about, well, it just got so hard, just maintaining, all aspects of life. Her husband's at war. She's trying to play professional sports. Her sister's involved in the league, and they don't always see eye to eye. She just says it simply got hard. Tom Hanks says, it's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, then everybody else would do it. The hard is what makes it great. Each year, when I was at my first job, we started off the year with that quote because that was something that I wanted to instill in the kids. And that's the culture that I wanted to create is this is hard now, but it's really going to pay off for you later and you're going to really appreciate it. And one of the last things that I wanted to do for this program was it was still in a very early development stage. They were changing lots of things prior to my coming of there. And they had a little bit of director turnover. And the previous directors, my predecessors, did some really, really nice work to get the program in a better spot to where you could start to mold it and do a lot more with it. And I simply wanted to get better. and I'll explain that a little bit more as this podcast progresses. But the culture that I was trying to create is I wanted it to be welcoming and set these kids up for success. So I was thinking, let's simply get better. And getting better could have been just each rep that we were taking, we were going to get better. Each rehearsal was going to make us better. Each time we went out into the community, we were going to have a better interaction with everybody. Whatever it was, just simply make things better. Now that you have an idea of the culture that you're trying to create and these little goals that you have to build a program around the culture, now you can start creating expectations. When talking about expectations, a lot of the time people just dive in. Well, they're like, well, you got to establish and set those expectations from day one. It's absolutely true. And it is said repeatedly. And, I've said that as well. The thing that we don't hear a lot of conversation about, though, is the creation part of the expectation. We always hear just set those expectations. What expectations? What have you thought about that? What are they going to be? You've done your reflection. Now you're ready to create. Things you need to consider. Where are you right now? Okay. And isolate what needs to improve the most. I think the best thing you can do is keep this in a very simple, simplistic fashion and see how you can achieve it in a simple way. So if you're starting small, I think you have more of an opportunity to grow from there. So an expectation that I wanted to really create at Benton County was, again, like I said earlier, I wanted to simply get better. This is a very broad expectation. And, we would, if it were marching band season, we'd be finishing up rehearsal. We'd do our little huddle at the end. And I'd always say our goal is to get what? And the kids always responded with, to get better. They always responded with better. And each rep that they took, you had to ask yourself, are we getting better? Each time we took the field, was each performance getting a little bit better? This broad expectation of us getting better lifted all aspects of the program, not only their physical, execution of drill and playing and stuff for marching band. It improved our attendance. Are we getting better with how we're showing up to things? It improved the overall behavior exceptionally. I know I had, some, as every first year teacher does, you have some interesting discipline moments where you're like, whoa, I never thought I'd have to deal with something like that. College didn't prepare me for this. But in those moments, this expectation of, hey, let's just get better. it elevated everybody. It brought everybody up to a higher level, both on a performing level and both on a personal level of just general expectations of, your personal self. The next thing, when you're creating these expectations, it kind of isolates itself into different categories. First and foremost, you're thinking, how does it reflect the culture you're trying to create? We talked about that briefly just a second ago. The next part of it, I really believe that it is limited in these 4 categories. And I don't want to use the word limited, but I feel like they get defaulted to these categories. And they are attitude and behavior, communication, and something along the lines of attendance and participation. Okay. Along with musical expectations, obviously, because we're in the field of music. Now, you could say, well, I thought of this expectation. A lot of the expectations we create can be moved into one of those categories, depending on how it's phrased and what it's specifically focused on. When you want to focus on one of these categories to create the expectation for, be realistic. Look at your resources. Look at your community. Look at the program that you currently have. Look at what is currently in place. Use those resources, and then you can go forward from there. I know when you get first out of college, you're super excited to make music, right? You've played all of this quality literature, you've learned so much, and you're just jacked to get started. I know when I first looked at my music library at my first job, one of the first pieces that I locked eyes with, it was weird. It was like an eyesight perfectly, was Holst First Suite. And I was like, oh man, that's super cool. Then I had, a realistic moment of, I have an 8th through 12th grade ensemble as my high school group. Some kids who have just joined this year. I have approximately 38 kids to start, and what am I going to realistically be able to do with that? Am I going to pull out whole suite off the shelf? No, it's not a realistic expectation to, be like, hey, we're going to play quality literature and music, but you're not going to pull out the big guns like that right off the bat. Is that a goal that you can live up to in the future? Absolutely. Go bananas. But set a realistic expectation of what kind of things you're going to plan for. I think the biggest ones that get neglected is, again, because we get so tied in with the logistics of the job that when we get to make music, we want to dive right into it. The expectations that we sometimes don't create are the attitude and behavior ones, the overall participation ones, because we just want to make music, and we expect the kids to be there. Just because we expect them to do it doesn't mean they're always going to, or they're not always going to want to. You have to establish the expectation and the attitude and behavior, which I highly recommend. That can elevate your program to a very, very productive, efficient, successful place. And, change your program from plateauing. That can really improve and rise you up. With this all being said, make sure that it's conducive to the culture that you are trying to create. Again, just loose end expectations aren't going to benefit anybody. Alrighty, so you've made strides to create the expectations. Now you are ready to start establishing them. First and foremost, be very, very clear on what you are wanting to establish. If there's any gaps in what you're trying to tell the kids, they're going to see through that pretty quickly, and they'll be like, well, you don't really have all the answers for this, so why would I want to participate? Make sure you have all of your, I's dotted, T's crossed, and, make sure it's a clear expectation what you're asking of the kids. Once it's clear on what you're trying to accomplish, make sure you establish it from day one, okay? You have to stick to these expectations. If you don't, it's game over. I always love, our state conference in Ohio, is kind of the middle of the year. It's in February. I always love attending. I was networking, talking with other director friends about what's working well in their programs and things like that. And, we get all these great ideas at convention, our state conference. And sometimes it's a little frustrating, though, because you can't integrate some of these changes that you really want to add in right off the bat when you get back to work. Some things you can slowly start to, put your big toe in the water and ease yourself into it. But a lot of these are some things that you have to, start at the beginning of a school year, or that you have to adapt and wait and modify them, because if you try to add something halfway through the year where they've already have an established routine, they're doing their normal thing, it's not going to be as effective. So again, as always, like we said earlier, start day one, make sure that you stick to them or it's game over. Next, this is really, really important, and I think this is where a lot of programs struggle with the establishment of the expectation. How are you integrating these expectations? This is a huge, huge deal that I see a lot of people struggle with, because it's one of those, it's not always what you say to the kids, but it's how you say it. And if you can present information to kids that is approachable, it's understanding, that they can buy into and attach to, gravitate towards, it's going to be easy from there on out. And you've done a lot of the groundwork for them. Okay. But if you are kind of saying like, this is how it is, you could get pushback instantly. And, the kids might just kind of shut down from that moment. I look at the movie Coach Carter. Again, I told you, another movie quote. Coach Carter, fantastic movie, based in California with the Richmond high school basketball team. Coach comes in and he sets this standard where the kids are going to perform in the classroom and on the court. And he has a long list of expectations for the kids as well. Talking about, professionalism, not taunting other players, not bad talking referees. He has, these expectations of respect that he really wants to instill the kids. Long story short, if he throws, locks on the gym because the kids aren't performing in the classroom. Okay. And with that, in that environment, it's a little different. Again, with the expectation, they could shut down right away. Okay. If it's something they've never seen, they're not used to it, they might give you a lot of pushback right off the bat. Not saying that you can't reach that level of success and accomplishment later on, but it might take a little bit longer to get the wheels turning. If you can present it in a way that's very approachable to where the kid's like, oh, that makes sense, you're going to be in a much better place, and you'll be able to integrate these expectations a lot sooner with a lot more ease and efficiency. The next part is the where you are communicating it. And this is kind of interesting. Expectations are something that you want to have be very, very consistent. And when I say by where, I'm saying, are you doing it at the beginning of your class every day? Are you, establishing the expectation at rehearsals? Are you establishing the expectation through social media? And when you travel to away games, are you establishing the expectation to the parents? Are you expecting your booster organization to hold up that same expectation? Is that expectation held up in those meetings with parents? Where is a thing that we want to make sure that it's being consistent as the expectation is traveling from medium to medium, whether it's a meeting, rehearsal, private lessons, whatever it may be for your program. Really, really consider the where and make sure that it's consistent with the culture you're trying to create. This part is a little tricky, is who is integrating them. Well, duh, Kevin, like obviously I have to do it. Yes, we as the teacher have to initially integrate that expectation. The goal, though, is to where you have the students lead the way, okay? Where you establish it to the kids, and then the kids are so attached, they're so bought in, they see the product, okay? They see the why. They see the why that you are trying to do. Why are we doing it this way, okay? And then they take on the charge and show that student leadership and integrate it into their sectionals with the kids. They integrate it with the new members, your new 8th graders coming in, where you have a senior kind of taking a freshman under their wing, trying to help them out, showing them what the expectation is, helping them through, and putting them in a better place. Which again, if you have a student doing that, peers are definitely going to listen to peers before they listen to any teacher. Think about how many times you have to ask your kids to stop talking in class. They want to listen to each other first. It's just what it is, which is totally fine. Think about that, though, how much pull these student leaders have, these students have. They're going to buy off of one another easily if the expectation is carried through a student after you have set it up correctly. And It is super, super important to know what the why is. If there's no rationale to the expectation, it's useless. If the kid can see through it and is like, it's not very well thought out, it's not very clear, and they ask, why are we doing this? And you don't have a legitimate answer to give them, they are going to completely shut down. They are not going to listen, and it is never going to work. So always, always, always have support for the rationale. I know with my kids, from day one, I am always like, I would never do something with you that I've never seen work before. So you're going to see new things from me on a regular basis. Okay. Especially if you're coming into a job that, you're brand new, it's your first gig, or, it's just a new position. You have very different experiences. You have very different expectations. Okay. Maybe than the person before, and you have a different twist on them. This is something that you have to consider when you are trying to relay these expectations to the kids, because each group of kids is very, very different. So if you share with them, hey, I would never do anything that wouldn't work or I haven't seen work, they're going to have a little bit more trust in that factor. Okay. Second, make sure, again, the why is clear though on, you've given them that platform of, hey, I would never do anything that wouldn't work. Now, why are we doing this specific expectation? Because this is going to improve blank, 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 blank. Always have the rationale backed up. So you've had your successes, you created your expectations, you've established them, and you're in a really, really good place with your program. This is where we see a lot of programs just stop. They maintain, they do find, they get their superior, or they get their top rating at your state conference or festival or contest, whatever you call it, and they just kind of stay there. If you ever get the opportunity, you need to listen to the wonderful speaker, Lou Holtz. Lou Holtz is a legendary coach. He has, approximately like 250 wins or something, has tremendous decades of leadership, taught at several different schools like Arkansas, Minnesota, Notre Dame. I believe he's at South Carolina in his last few years of coaching, North Carolina State in his early career. And he was a rebuilding guy. He was a fixer guy. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love Lou Holtz. I'm a very fix-it kind of person. If I see something, I'm like, oh, we could do this and we could do this and we could do this. That's just me as a person. And Lou Holtz talks about, yes, we were very successful. We made it to, championship level bowl games during, the course of my career. When I was at Notre Dame, we were, at the top. We were like number 1 and number 2 in the country. By the end of his time there, when he started, they were not. And he says the worst thing that we did, though, as a coaching staff, as a football program, and as an organization was all we did was maintain. So they reached that, that high level of performance, but then all they did was maintain, and they simply just kept it there. They plateaued. There was no more growth. And you always have to look down the road and see what you can modify and how your kids can benefit in a different way. If you are telling yourself, well, this is how we've always done it and we've had success, that's great if you've had success. But if you're saying like, well, this is just how we've done it, you need to reevaluate some things. You need to really consider, what are other things that I can do to bring us up to an even higher level than the kids are right now and the program is right now. And I really like this quote because, I think there's a lot of truth to it. I think everybody has faced it at one point or another, that's how we've always done it. And I was actually listening to another podcast called Expanding the Zone, which is actually with one of my, previous colleagues down at Vinton County where I first taught, Mr. Matt Combs. He's the athletic director at Vinton County Local Schools, and he's also a fantastic basketball coach, just a tremendous coach. And he has this podcast with his brother, who is also an educator and is a baseball coach. And they talked about this episode literally like last week, I believe. And they talked about the quote, that's how we've always done it, and, different parts of sports and, leadership and things like that, where they discuss why do we do it this way? Like, why has it been, this is how we always did it? So if you're interested in sports and student leadership, you should check out Expanding the Zone. It's a fantastic podcast. But that episode really got me thinking, like, this applies to every situation, and particularly in the band world, choir world, orchestra world, every music program you could possibly think of. We really, really need to think is the work we're doing now benefiting the kids overall? And yes, we've been successful. How can we become more successful? By establishing some sort of new expectation or modifying the current ones we have. So in conclusion, once you have the culture established, once you know what you want to create as a whole for your program, create those expectations realistically. Think of how you can integrate them in a careful way to where it's going to set you up for more success, and never stop building upon them even when you have reached successful moments. Always grow, always continue to get better, and always go all in. No pun intended. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and have an awesome rest of your week. Hey guys, thanks again so much for listening. If you liked this video, please feel free to subscribe. If you're more of a visual person, feel free to subscribe right on YouTube. If you're more of just wanting an audio, if you're that person that likes to ride in their car, be sure to check out Buzzsprout, iTunes, and Spotify. If you like to email, feel free to email musiced.allin@gmail.com. Don't forget to like the Music Ed All In Facebook page for updates, trailers, and more. Take it easy, gang, and always go all in.